morning. When people come in, if you could introduce yourselves rather than, I will introduce the presenters, but
okay, Chair, ready.
Members.
Ready, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Hazel. Okay, well, good morning. Bore da, croeso i'r gyfarfod plant a pobl ifanc yn Sir Fynwy. Welcome, good morning, and welcome to the meeting for children and young people in Monmouthshire this morning. I'm Tudor Thomas, and I'm chair of this committee, and I'm also obviously a member in Abergavenny, and I will obviously be chairing the meeting today. In terms of the protocol, members will generally have their screens and mics off, and then I will leave mine on as chair, but I'd probably mute when people are presenting. And when people want to come in, if you raise your hand, and then obviously I'll ask you to come in, and then obviously put your camera on and put your mic on so that you can actually give your question or make your comment. We go now to the agenda, and the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. And I have at the moment apologies from Joe Watkins, Councillor Joe Watkins, and Councillor Frances Taylor, who's new to the committee, and I welcome her in her absence. And she has another commitment, but she's going to join in at about 11 a.m. So obviously welcome her. I will welcome the presenters, obviously for this morning, Mike Moran, who's the Community Infrastructure Coordinator, and his other officer, Matthew Lewis, who's going to look at the play provision, and then Will McLean, who is obviously Senior Officer for CYP. Go to agenda item 2, declarations of interest, and I must make a declaration of interest here for item 5 on the agenda, the Welsh Medium Education, to discuss the strategic plan. I am a governor and have been for some time on the governing body of the Welsh School in Abergavenny, Ysgol Gymraeg Aveni, and I was also involved in the campaign to get Welsh medium provision way back in 1989 until it opened in 1994. But I have no other interest, and if the committee is happy, I will chair that agenda item, having declared that I have checked out with the legal officer, and it is not a prejudicial interest on my part. So if people, unless anybody wishes to make a point about that, is anybody unhappy with that? Okay, thanks. And obviously I will not speak at any length on that item. I will chair that item as normal. Item 3, public open forum. I'm not aware of anything that's been brought to my attention that a member of the public wishes to speak today. So we move now to agenda item 4, which is review of play provision to consider the findings of an assessment of play areas in Monmouthshire and to consider the way forward. So I hand over now to Mike Moran, Community Infrastructure Coordinator, and his other senior officer, Matthew Lewis. Mike.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everybody. First of all, can I say thank you for the opportunity to present to your committee this report, because it does mark a sort of a bit of a sea change in the way that we approach fixed play. I think it would be helpful perhaps just to mention a couple of the statutory framework within which we're operating at the moment.
Can you put your camera on, Mike, so that the members of the public can see you?
Very good. I mean, I'm sat on the beach at the moment in the Seychelles, but you'll have to forgive me for that. Yes, the statutory framework for play in Wales at the moment is the Welsh Government was I think the first government in Europe to legislate for play and to make it a statutory duty of local authorities. So every 3 years we have to carry out a detailed play sufficiency assessment. And every year we provide an update on that assessment, and we also set out an action plan for the forthcoming 12 months. And if members look at paragraph 3.5 in the report, they will see the details of what we submitted when we last did a play sufficiency action plan. So this report is following on from that, Chair, and it covers 2 or 3 areas. The first one is looking at the assessment that was carried out last year by an independent consultant for us on the play value of all our play areas in Monmouthshire. And just to be specific, we have about 110 play areas across the county at the moment. The results of that play value assessment were not terribly encouraging. They basically highlighted that 3 of our play areas ranked as good in terms of the play value that they offered to children and young people. There were about 10 play areas that were ranked as adequate, and the rest of them were ranked as poor. I need to say at this stage that none of the play areas is unsafe. Most of our play areas are inspected on a weekly basis to comply with our insurance requirements. And there's nothing actually wrong with them, other than a lot of them are quite old, and they consist of tubular metal structures that were designed in the day for longevity and not necessarily play value. So this report is trying to address some of those issues that came out of the play value assessments. There's also some background in terms of the council, in that we don't have a dedicated play budget. So quite often on some of the older play areas, when a piece of equipment comes to the end of its useful life, instead of actually being able to replace it, we quite often take those items of play equipment out, which is not an ideal situation, really. So what we're suggesting in this report is that we look at a process of rationalising our play areas in the county, which may mean the closure of 1 or 2 smaller play areas, and that we also move away from the Fields in Trust 6-acre standard, which is a document that gives us an indication of how many play areas we should be providing per 100 population in each of the areas. So for those of you that know the Rockfield estate in Monmouth, we've ended up with 10 play areas on that one estate alone. And the evidence shows that many of those play areas are very much underused. So what we would like to do is to move towards a system where we've got neighbourhood play areas in each of our 4 main towns, and we also have doorstep play areas which are located in some of the income deprived wards that we've got in Monmouthshire. And in doing this, we would also like to move forward when we're considering new applications or when we're considering new proposals for development in Monmouthshire. We would like to be able to, rather than just provide new play areas on new estates, we would like to look at limiting the number of new play areas that are installed and asking the developers for contributions to upgrade some of our existing play areas, so that we're sort of evening up the situation. Because at the moment, if we get a new development in Monmouthshire and there are new play areas put onto a new estate, not only do we get the new equipment, but we also get a commuted sum to maintain that play area for the first 20 years of its life. Whereas if you're living in an area that's got an older play area, there is no maintenance budget, and the play area is likely to be not in very good condition. So to use a bit of an analogy, in Monmouth, if you can think about the new estate that was built at Chapsto, that will have 4 brand new play areas, and it will also have a maintenance budget for the first 20 years of its life to keep it fresh, to keep it in good condition. But if you're living in one of the older parts of the town, maybe in King's Fee or Galway Lane or Hendra Close, your children are playing on a play area that's over 50 years old and for which there is no maintenance budget. So we think there's an element of social justice about that, really, that some of our longer standing residents in those areas are not benefiting to the same extent as people that are moving onto new estates. So our proposal, in short, really, Chair, is to look at a process of rationalisation across the county. We would like to carry out a trial pilot exercise in Monmouth, the reasons for which I'll come on to in a second, where we look at rationalising some of the play areas, particularly in the Rockfield area of Monmouth, and re-provision some of those play areas as local spaces for nature, because we think there's a very close link between natural open spaces and fixed play areas. And we'd like to invest in some of the older play areas to bring them up to a reasonable standard. And in the case of Monmouth, we have actually been able to access some funding this year through the All Wales Play Sufficiency Grant to upgrade some play areas. So we'd like to concentrate those resources on the 3 play areas that I mentioned at King's Fee, Galway Lane and Henry Close. And we'd also like to, we've also accessed some funding through the WCVA to employ a consultant to draw up a plan for re-provisioning some of the play areas on the Rockfield estate, but also for improving the landscape value around all of our play areas in Monmouth. And that's basically the nub of this proposal, Chair. One of the other items mentioned in paragraph 3.5 in the report is the replacement play area on Chippenham. And just to advise members, we now have a proposed layout plan for the new play area and a schedule of equipment. So we will be consulting on that starting probably later this week. We'll have something on the council's website, and we'll be consulting with the town council, etc. And we'll also be consulting with local organisations, including some of the disability organisations in Monmouth, because there is an issue about accessibility of some of our fixed play areas as well. So that's where we are at the moment. If we are able to go ahead with this proposal, we wouldn't move forward without full consultation with local residents. So we wouldn't take a play area out and just re-provision it as is. We would actually do a fairly detailed consultation with local residents to get their views on it and hopefully to get their support. And once we've arrived at a situation where we've got what we think is a sustainable model of fixed play provision in the town of Monmouth, that will then give us the ability to roll that out to the other main towns in the county. And what that will do, hopefully, is it will make the situation in terms of fixed play maintenance a lot easier for our operations department. It will give them more time to spend on site to carry out those fairly small repairs that do need to take place from time to time. And it will also provide us with some really, really good play areas that do have a high standard of play value. So whereas at the moment there is no play area in Monmouth that is ranked as good, we would hope at the end of this programme that we would have at least 5 or 6 play areas that do rank as good in terms of play value. I think, Chair, I would probably leave it there, but our vision, if you like, for Monmouth would be that we would probably end up with about 6 neighbourhood play areas. They would probably be in places like Carbon Close, Wanstow Road, the Rockfield Estate, Chippenham, Wisham, and there's a bit of a gap in Osbaston because there is very little play provision in Osbaston, and we would seek to develop play provision in Osbaston if and when there are any future proposals for residential development there. That's where we would look to get the funding for that through the terms of a Section 106 agreement.
Okay, well, Mike, thank you very much for that report on play area. And obviously, it's an important area. See a raised hand now. Councillor Martin Grogut wishes to make a comment or a question. Councillor Grogut.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mike. You've given me the option to open my comments with one of my favourite phrases: fine words, butter, no parsnips. I have absolutely no idea what it means, really, but they were fine words, and if there were parsnips to be buttered, it would have done the job, Mike. But the reality is there are other ways of looking at play. And the reason why your report has been called for, I suspect, is that the state and condition of much of our play equipment is rapidly going downhill, and we have to find alternatives. It's with a heavy heart, I have to say, that there may be no alternative because of the financial situation we find ourselves in. But nonetheless, we can wring hands in public and say, it's a shame we got to this state, because equipment goes downhill and there is a lack of resources to keep it up to scratch. And then ultimately we end up where we are with this report, and we have to say there are other ways of doing play. Chair, I'm very proud of the fact that my daughter is an elected member in St Helens, and she's the cabinet member for education and young people. That authority has just spent a large amount of money on promoting play equipment in its parks. And from personal experience, when I'm there with my grandchildren, it is exceptionally well used. And it is great to see young preschool children playing together and learning important social skills of sharing and teamwork and developing friendships, as well as just playing. And that will be lost, I think, with the end of traditional playgrounds, apart from the one or two in lucky areas of the county. I think paragraph 3.8 of the report is the giveaway. It says it's not considered value for the costs of maintenance and reducing budgets. So that's where we are. We haven't got the money. We're in the sad situation where even our children have been hit by austerity, and it will not be to their advantage as they grow up. Paragraph 310 shows the new reality, maybe. It says alternative uses for playgrounds, such as community food growing, local provenance tree nurseries, and mini meadows. Well, if that's the world for my 3-year-old grandchildren or my 6-year-old grandchildren who just love going on the swings and meeting people and playing with them, then the world will be a sadder place, I think, worthy as they are. I think that there are alternatives. Mike has made the best of a bad job, and I think that's what I meant by fine words, buttering no parsnips. He's been given a hospital pass, as they say on the sports field, and he has to justify it. But I think it is a sad day when our traditional parks aren't available locally for our children. And as I say, I accept there are perhaps more statutory priorities that as an authority we will have to keep. But a sad day when I read a report like this, and I feel sorry for children like my grandchildren and old codgers like me who take them and see them having a great time on wonderful play equipment, which we don't have, we can't afford, and austerity has got us where we are now because local authorities like Monmouthshire have lost millions of pounds over the last decade. So with sadness, I'll conclude, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Groker. Mike, do you want to come back in? Do you want to answer that? Make a comment?
Not necessarily about parsnips, Chair, but with due respect, I don't think that the situation is quite as bad as it's being painted there, really. I do, you know, there has been some frustration over the years at the lack of a dedicated play budget, but I think the officers see this as a positive way forward, because it means that we can then attract funding to put into play for those play areas that will remain. And in terms of Monmouth, because I'll use that as an example, that's probably the best way of explaining it. We're not talking about taking out a large number of play areas. What we're talking about is a rationalisation process so that we do have good quality neighbourhood play areas that have got equipment in them made out of sustainable hardwoods, which is moving away from the traditional tubular metal things, and that have got a much higher education value than some of the play equipment we've got at the moment. And I think it's also worth reflecting on one of the outcomes of our Playmaker conferences last year, which is where we get all the Year 5 pupils from the primary schools in Monmouthshire assembled in one place to do activities. But we also asked them a series of questions. And one of the questions last year that we asked them was, would you prefer to play on a fixed play area or a green space? And it did surprise us that this year, or last year for the first time, the vast majority of children expressed a view that they would prefer to play in a green open space than on fixed play equipment. And it wasn't as though it was a narrow margin. I think there were 598 responses that said that, compared to 290 that said that they wanted traditional play areas. So we're not talking about doing away with a lot of play areas. We're just talking about reducing the number that we've got and investing in the ones that remain to make them a lot better. And we're also conscious that a lot of the play areas that we've inherited, and they were inherited not just in 1996, but in 1974 as well from the predecessor authorities, and some of them were in a bit of a state then. And they tend to be on what were once local authority housing estates. So we're not talking about reducing those types of play area at all. We're talking about investing money in them and making them better places for children to play, but also bringing in some sensory planting and some landscape features, because one of the feedbacks from another piece of research is that sensory planting is quite helpful in encouraging children on the autistic spectrum to participate in play. So we're trying to adopt a much softer approach and linking nature with play in all of the areas that we've got there. And just to sort of briefly answer Martin's point, in terms of finance, we're currently looking to spend something like £110,000 on the new Chippenham play area. Last year we spent £86,000 in Wisham at Tudor Road and Woodland Road. And this year we've accessed another £70,000 to invest in the 3 play areas that I was talking about. So this is very much about having a plan so that when resources do become available, we can apply for those resources. And once we've reported on the outcome of the Monmouth pilot, I'm hopeful that people in the Welsh Government will sit up and realise that we're actually trying to benefit perhaps some of the less well-off people in each of our 4 main towns, really.
Okay, thank you, Mike. We go to Councillor Maureen Powell now, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank Mike for that extensive speech he gave about what's going to happen, and I'm very glad to hear it. And he's very right about when developments put houses up. I've got a couple in my ward where they've put a little square with a little bouncy animal in it and a bit of a very small perhaps merry-go-round thing, which is only suitable for toddlers, and they think they're doing their bit. And I think it's far better if they make that money gift to the council to use, put together with others to build decent sized playgrounds, because those are only suitable for toddlers, and what we need is one suitable for all children. I was interested too what he said about the green spaces. Looking back to my childhood, which I know was in the dark ages, we didn't have much equipment about. It was wartime, but what we did, we had a lot of make-up games. We made up our own games. You know, we were Robin Hood or Dick Barton or something like that. But that's why I was quite pleased when I heard that they like the green spaces. Just they want space to interact with each other, and they do make up their own games because they have got imaginations, and that was good to hear. It does take time, but hopefully we will get them restored in time, and I want to thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Mike, do you want to make any comment or carry on?
Just carry on, Chair.
Okay,
I could.
Okay, thank you. Go to Maggie Harris now then, please, for mask.
So, and the camera.
Right. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you, Mike Harris.
I fully endorse just everything that Martin has said, because I think it is very sad having to discuss this through lack of funding. I realise, Mike, thank you for a very extensive report and a lot of research that's gone on for providing what you have provided. But play for children is so important for little ones and for big ones. And play areas where you've got swings and things, they are much more for the little children. And I'm not surprised that on the survey that said by year 5 they wanted green open spaces, because that's what you find at school. You know, our campus happens to be quite large, and so they've got a lot of running around space, but not every school is that fortunate. Not every area is fortunate to have run around areas. And I'd worry about what we're going to do for large open provision with open spaces, green spaces. I think we're stuck with what we've got. If you haven't got the money, you can't make the provision. And I think it sounds as if you're being able to fund money as best you can, and I look forward to the outcome. But I do rue the day that we are having to close down play areas because we can't fund them. But if that's what we're faced with, that's what we'll have to do. But I think it's a very sad day. But thank you for your report. There's a lot of work's gone into that. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Matthew, do you want to come in there, please?
Yes, if I could. Sorry, Matthew Lewis. I'm the Environment and Culture Manager for Monlife. Yeah, I just wanted to not sort of reflect. I think this is slightly about looking at play through to a slightly different lens. It's not to in any way diminish the value of fixed play areas, which are, as members have just said, a really important part of the play offer. But it's perhaps we've perhaps fallen in the last few years into a bit of a trap of not creating playable environments in the wider sense, and just saying that the fixed play areas are the playable environments. And I think what we're trying to do is to say we're looking at that, as I say, through a slightly different lens, which is looking at what the value can be, both of fixed play, Mike has said, that setting that into a wider environment, which is perhaps a bit more varied, has opportunities for wild play, and coming again at it through a different lens in terms of thinking about play value, which is a relatively recent concept. You know, in the past, play areas have perhaps just been assessed on the basis of it's got a slide, it's got a swing, etc. But there's now quite a lot of science around looking at the actual value that those facilities give to children in terms of the wider value from play. So it's not to disagree with what's been said at all. You know, there are definite challenges, but it's coming out of the lens from quality rather than quantity, and that's the idea in terms of looking at Monmouth is to try that out in the real world and see where that takes us.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. Thanks. Councillor Louise Brown.
Oh, good morning, everybody. Councillor Louise Brown, member for Shire Newton Board and Vice Chair. Thank you for the report, which was very interesting. I do believe that play is and the parks are so important for young children and for parents to use those facilities. And I noticed in your report it mentioned that there was a detailed list. I couldn't find a detailed list of assessment on the public website or on the members one. Maybe I missed it. I'm not sure. The other issue is that is this something that needs to be looked at during the planning stage? Because obviously you're talking about a particular estate having a larger number of play areas and rationalising those. Wouldn't it be better to actually do that, if you can, with hindsight at the planning stage? And effectively, instead of a 20-year maintenance, if you're having fewer areas, then would you be better to ask for a 40-year maintenance, to compensate for that? I mean, these are just sort of alternatives that could be looked at. The other issue is the importance of play areas on new estates is often because the size of the gardens aren't big enough, and rather than go around and play at somebody else's house in their back garden, because of the size of the gardens, because of wanting to build as many houses in as small a plot as possible, there's less facilities in the back gardens. And I think that's something that could also be looked at, because kids have if they've got room, they have trampolines in their back garden, and that's a sort of a local neighbourhood play area in itself. The other question I've got is, in terms of these open space areas that you're talking about, again the issue of maintenance comes up, and I think really you've got to sort of think about how will you get local community and volunteers to actually maintain it. And I know in Meadowland, for example, the Gwent Wildlife Trust, they do a lot of work and coordinate a lot of work. And I think it's a question of looking at third-party organisations and community groups to see if they can actually help to maintain these open space areas, because again, although you're not replacing equipment, you're going to have the same sort of issue. The other point I'd like to make, Chair, is that it's very important to consult with all the town councils and the local people on this issue, because any changes in play areas you often get a strong community reaction to that, and I think consulting on it is very important at a local level, so they know what can be done. I mean, on a village level, there tend to be small play areas in village hall settings, but the precept is then used to help replace equipment, and is often a bit of a struggle because of I'm always astounded by the price of new equipment, actually play equipment, which runs into the thousands, and can be quite expensive. But I suppose if village areas are doing this sort of thing, maybe town councils can look at sort of assisting in the way that rural areas do. Sorry, I've gone on a bit, but there's quite a few points. Okay. I hope I haven't made too many. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Go back then to Mike Moran to pick up on any issues, and I will then conclude then. Mike.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Brown has hit on an extremely important point there about when we're looking at new developments, we do sort of intervene at the planning stage. Just to give you a very quick example, again, talking about Wannerstow, when the Wannerstow estate was developed in Monmouth, we used the 6-acre standard, and by the calculations, it meant that we had to put 4 play areas on that development. And we have gone back to the developer and said, look, we think that 4 is too many. Would you be prepared to maybe put 2 or 3 play areas in? and give us the funding that you would otherwise use to install the other two, and we can use those on existing areas. And although the site manager thought it was an extremely good idea, the company directors felt that it wasn't, because they wanted to be able to say that they'd actually paid for these new play areas on the new estate. So I think if we can jump in at the planning stage and make sure that we make some provision for fixed play on new estates, but also get more funding out of developers to deal with existing areas, that would be the ideal scenario to deal with, really. And one of the reasons that we're suggesting the pilot in Monmouth is that there is a group there called Action on Climate Emergency, and there's also the Friends groups as well for some of the local play areas. So we do have, or we are anticipating quite a strong sort of input by the voluntary sector and by those organisations. And as I said earlier at the beginning of the meeting, we wouldn't seek to do anything without full consultation, and the first people we will be consulting will be the town councils, because we have found them very supportive in the past, and I believe that if we can put the argument to them in the right sort of frame, they may well be willing to come along and maybe contribute to some of the proposals that we're putting forward. So I fully agree with Councillor Brown on those three issues. I think they're very important points to consider. I think I've covered everything that you said, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, could I just come back? I mean, if the developers, you know, if you'd worked out, through you, Chair, if you'd worked out that, say, there were 4 areas and you thought that there ought to be 2, and obviously they provide the 20-year section 106 or the agreement to maintain it for that period, could you also ensure that if you continue with the same number of areas and you had 2 open space areas and 2 play areas with normal equipment, could you not ask for those 2 open space areas to also have a 20-year maintenance? Because obviously they I think developers think in boxes about what they are supposed to do, and that might be less radical than saying, can we have 40 years on our 2 standard play areas? Do you see what I'm arguing?
Yes. Yeah, just in answer to that very briefly, Chair, we also ask for a commuted sum to maintain the green open spaces on estates as well. Again, it's only for 20 years. We'd have to look with our legal section to find out if we could specify a longer period. I mean, I would be all for that, because, you know, we've worked on retaining open spaces in the county, and I think we've probably established more fields that are protected with the Fields in Trust and the National Playing Fields Association than any authority in Wales. I think we're up to 24 at the moment, and if I'm honest, if I was allowed to do it, I would protect every open space we've got in the county, because they're becoming much more precious now with the pressure for residential development in the county.
Because they don't have to pay the play equipment, so they should be able to contribute to the commuted sum of keeping it going, shouldn't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think danger now of breaking down into a dialogue. So thanks, Councillor Brown, but thanks, Mike. Anything else you want to say in summing up, Mike?
I think just to sum up, Chairman, as I say, I understand that there may be some reticence on the part of some members at closing a few play areas, but we're not talking about mass play area closures. I would anticipate that if we were to reduce the number of play areas across the county by 20 or 25 out of 110 and replace them with really good quality play areas that do offer a high level of play value, it wouldn't mean any estates going without a play area. It would just mean that the play areas that remain are in good condition, and we have better facilities to maintain them going into the future.
Okay. Well, look, Mike Moran and Matthew Louise this morning, you know, thank you very much for coming in to present this report. I've got to say, from not as a chair, but purely as a town and county councillor in Abergavenny, personally, I feel reasonably optimistic with this report. in the sense that some play areas will be closed, but other areas will then be brought up to provide a much higher level of play standard. And I think of my own ward and think of Priory and Bailey Park, and there's an excellent play area there which is fenced off so people can't take their dogs in there, so it's clean, there is no dog mess, and children of a varying age from sort of preschool right through to sort of 10 can play, and that is important. And I do think that there are grounds for optimism. But just to sum up, obviously, some county councillors here this morning, particularly Councillor Martin Grocott and Maggie Harris, who represents MASP, do feel some pessimism and are concerned about the cut in play provision due to austerity. On the other hand, Councillor Maureen Powell said that she felt more optimistic. And obviously Louise Brown raised important issues about play at the planning stage. I think the overall wish of the committee is that there is good play provision across the authority, and that all children, regardless of where they live, whether they live in the north or the south, that they have fairly close, that they have provision for active play, and that is productive in terms of the skills that they learn whilst they're playing. So I think overall we've had some, as it were, concerns this morning, but I'm taking hopefully the view of the meeting that I think generally we accept the report, but obviously we will monitor this carefully, and we will be looking for very good play provision in the areas where play provision remains. And obviously we certainly hope there won't be a huge cut in play provision. Some play provision is probably past its sell by, and that is important. Things have changed, children have moved on, and sometimes equipment gets to a point where it's not really providing very useful play. So once again, Mike and Matthew, thank you very much for coming in this morning and presenting your report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, now then, we move to the next item on the agenda, and this is agenda item number 5, and this is Welsh medium education, to discuss the strategic plan for Welsh education. And I now hand over to Mr. Will McLean, who is the Senior Officer for Children and Young People in Monmouthshire. Thank you, Will.
Excellent. Good morning. Thank you, Chair, and good morning, committee. I'm going to share my screen just to present a brief presentation which sets out the background to the Welsh in Education Strategic Plan. But I'm sure many of you will be glad to hear that I won't be doing very much talking this morning, and my colleague Sharon Randall-Smith will take you through the presentation and the papers that have been shared with you prior to today's meeting. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully you'll be able to see that, and I'll hand over to Sharon, who will do the presentation.
Okay.
There we go. Is everyone able to see?
Yes, that's fine. Thanks.
Excellent. Okay, great. In which case, I'll pass over to Sharon now, who will talk to the presentation.
Okay. Thanks very much, Will, and good morning, everyone. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk to you about the WESP today, where we are, perhaps its historic background a little bit, and more importantly as well, where we're going in the future. So within the presentation, we tried to cover the background and history, current arrangements, and future WESP, because things will change significantly over time. So if we move then to the next slide. So the WESP is our long-term language planning tool, which actually will set the strategic direction for any local authority to deliver a growth of Welsh medium education. It includes our strategy for that to increase Welsh medium, and also how our vision creates those wider Welsh Government priorities. So those are things like the well-being of future generations, particularly a Wales of vibrant culture and thriving Welsh language, taking Wales forward, which looks at using Welsh not just as young people, but as we look at, you know, developing economically and the opportunities to use that, and Cymraeg 2050, which is looking at the number of Welsh speakers in Wales in 1 million by 2050. And also, the second key part of that is the percentage of the population that can use Welsh regularly, to increase that from 10% to 20%. So not just the, you know, the Boridar and Prynhawn, but to be able to hold conversations in Welsh, or to use Welsh at every opportunity throughout all of our lives. Thanks. Thanks, Will. Within that, the local authority have certain duties that have been placed upon us. So the WESP will be one of the main driving forces for the Welsh Government to achieve their targets. So the WESP has been set up in a particular form with content and timing, and it's specified by Welsh ministers. In 2013, an act was introduced, was laid down on the local authority to take all reasonable steps to implement its approved plan. So whilst we might have had plans before, really from 2013 onwards, they became something very significant and something that was requiring impact in order to move forward. So we are required to keep the WESP under review and submit an annual progress report to ministers. The form and content of that has changed and evolved, and hopefully from some of the information you will see that I provided to councillors today, you will see that we keep our WESP under a review as regularly as possible. During COVID, it's been more difficult to do so, but within the action plan, you can see how we've reviewed on a termly basis. And then at the end of the year, we've submitted either that plan to WESP, to the Welsh ministers, or this year we'll submit the annual report, which you also have, to Welsh ministers as well. Just to be very clear, Welsh ministers have the power to issue guidance to the local authority. So this means that if, for example, there was something that they didn't feel that we were doing or should be doing, there would be no doubt about it, they would have the powers to encourage us strongly to do that, or even in some cases to take required action. Thanks, Bob. So just taking you through the evolution of the WESP. The School Standards and Organisation Act was enacted in 2013, and from then the first sort of WESP as we know them was introduced and submitted and actioned, and that covered a 3-year period. In that first sort of WESP cycle, things had tightened a little bit, but we didn't have the level of challenge that we saw in the second WESP, which covered the period from 2017 to 2020. So within WESP, you submit your plan a year before they become an actual implementation plan from September of that year. So in the second 2017 to 2020 cycle, many of the WESP plans across Wales returned for further amendment. I think it would be fair to say that we didn't have major amendments in the Monmouthshire plan, but nevertheless, ours was one of many that was returned. As a result, a rapid review of WESP plans was carried out by Aled Roberts, who's now the Welsh Language Commissioner for Wales. Will and I were part of that process, and we met with him. And I think there was a clear recognition at that point that the plan of a 3-year cycle really wasn't helpful for local authorities. And it was really difficult to demonstrate impact and progress. And also, it wasn't necessarily ambitious enough to be able to move things forward. So that was one of the things that came through. and also the fact that all local authorities are at a different point and they exist in a different context. So, for example, Monmouthshire, we're a border county. We have provision in many areas of our education system, but not sort of secondary school, or not in huge amounts at post-16 at this time. So, but it was good to hear that was recognised by Welsh Government through this rapid review. There's also a link to that report at the end of this presentation, because some of the recommendations for that are quite interesting. So in 2018, our plan was resubmitted and it was approved and implemented, again ahead of other some of the other authorities as well. And then as a part of that, we've continued to implement the actions from that. And as I said, you've seen the progress that we've made. In 2019, new legislation was laid down in response to that rapid review, and the requirements for WESP were and will be changed. As you can see, 2017 to 2020 should be the end of the cycle. But very recently, Welsh Government have determined that given the pandemic and the need for us to consult on the next WESP and where we are and the impact, they have postponed that until 2021. They've extended our time. So it's helpful to all of us, and that gives us more time to prepare for the next WESP. Okay, thanks, Will. So if we start with the current WESP, there are 7 targets which are determined by Welsh Government, which you can see here. So the 7-year-old children are our year 2 cohort. If we're looking at learners improving their language skills on transfer primary to secondary, we look at literally at the moment, the key for that is year 9. The students studying qualifications through the medium of Welsh, that is not just Welsh first language, but that's also second language Welsh. More learners 16 to 19 studying Welsh is post 16. Looking at improved skills in Welsh, so that's looking at the whole of our education system, from wherever the children are learning Welsh, be it English medium or Welsh medium schools. How are we developing? And we're developing, pretty well as an authority. And then looking for Welsh medium provision for learners with additional learning needs to align very strongly with the the Additional Learning Needs Act, which is currently going through its final stages of process. And then workforce planning and continuous professional development. Clearly, in order to be able to look at an impact on the other targets, that really needs to be in place as well. But those are set from the Welsh ministers. Obviously, the targets were set in 2016, and a lot has changed in that time in education, very much in the way of our reporting requirements, but also the ALN Act and the way that has evolved. So, there are lots of things that we have to think about, but perhaps wouldn't report them in the same way as we did when the plan was first put together. I think it's really important to say that the WESP isn't just, an education or school improvement drive, responsibility, although what we do within our schools is absolutely key to moving forward. It actually is very dependent on all of us working together in order to have the impact that's required. So it's not even just a local authority alone responsibility. There are lots of key partners, for example, the local authorities, sort of outside the, the EAS as well, that work outside our normal organisation, but within the local authority as well. It covers a wide range of partners. So as you can see, the early years and childcare is involved in this little diagram, and our Welsh in Education Forum, which is a fundamental part of us moving forward, includes other wider partners such as the IRS, Mudiad Maithrin. It's chaired by Councillor John, so there is a council representative on there. So it is very wide reaching, and it means that we have to work collaboratively together. So the Welsh in Education Forum meets termly, or it was regularly meeting. We haven't had a meeting in the summer term, but we do have one planned. It's this week, in order to look at and contribute to progress of the WESP and to contribute to what we will be doing and how our WESP will be looking going forward. Right. If we then move on to WESP 2022 to 2032, seems like forever, I know, but the measures will change a little bit. So when we're looking at the first measure, we're looking at children who are currently in our early years setting, receiving their education through the medium of Welsh. So looking at how we can increase that. Similarly, we're looking at reception class in the second outcome, which is 5-year-olds. So this is year 1 pupils. In the previous WESP, we had a 3-year cycle, and we would be looking at children who were receiving education through the medium of Welsh in year 2. But literally, they started in reception and were only in that cohort, in that group, for a 3-year period. So to influence and impact that target was really difficult because it was pretty much already set. Whereas if we look at year 1 children over a longer period of time, we can look at those trajectories. Looking at more children, improving Welsh language skills when transferring from one stage of their statutory education to another, and that's from foundation phase to key stage 2 to 3, 3 to 4, and so on. It's not just at that point of transition from primary to secondary. And again, looking at the learners studying for qualifications. So all of our learners will study Welsh up until the end of key stage 4 now, but looking at how that is translating into percentages of GCS outcomes at the end of key stage 4 is something that we'll monitor. And we've included that within our current WESP. The opportunities to learn Welsh in different contexts in school is also, that reflects the requirements of the new curriculum and the way in which we're generally learning anyway, learning across a range of contexts. There's also a consultation out at the moment, which will is asking and seeking for views on whether English language should be a compulsory element of the curriculum in foundation phase. Currently, it is in an English medium school, as Welsh language is compulsory from 3 anyway, right the way through. The new curriculum will offer lots of opportunities for children to learn bilingually. And actually, when you visit settings and schools, you see that that's happening. So, language is being used and reinforced in both languages through the activities. So if they're playing with water, they're playing with dŵr as well. So, we can see that. And the proposal seeks to understand whether this will have, what impact that might have, and whether this would be a good idea to support the work of the WESP. Increasing Welsh medium education provision of learners with additional learning needs, it does actually now link with the ALN Act. And again, in recent times, the regional work that's been going on has supported this development and will continue to do so and strengthen. So, for example, we now have a regional lead for ALN Welsh language, and we're looking at how we can improve recruitment in that area. And finally, increasing the number of teaching staff able to teach Welsh as a subject and teach through the medium of Welsh. Clearly, in order to affect change and to be able to manage any increase in Welsh medium education, we are going to need to look at that very closely and look at the recruitment of it. We have quite a number of staff in Monmouthshire who've been completed the Welsh sabbatical course, so they're now qualified fully to teach through the medium of Welsh in a Welsh medium school. Fortunately, they're working in English medium schools at the moment and building up that skill expertise across clusters and sharing good practice. So, but that is going to be, a real focus going forward. Welsh ministers have considered where they need our schools to be and what our parts to play in moving forward for each local authority. So the purpose So what they've done is looked at the proportion of each school year group receiving Welsh medium education and want to increase that. So 22% to 30% by 2031 as a, as the first milestone, which would have aligned with the end of the WESP, and then 40% by 2050, and that's quite significant going forward. So in recognition of the fact that all of the authorities may be different, we're all at different starting points, we have different contexts, they've set targets for each local authority, and that's the pathway to reach that national target. And they've set upper and lower limits for each authority. So we've got those on the next slide. Monmouthshire's targets compared to Wales. So in 2017-18, the number of pupils who were learning through the medium of Welsh in Monmouthshire was 52. By 2030-31, the target at the lower end for us is 105, which would be 12%, up to 146 at 16%. The 2030-31 targets would equate to between 4 and 5 classes of 30 across the whole of Monmouthshire in order to be somewhere within that target. Currently, we have 2 schools. We know that in one school our numbers are increased, so we maybe have 1.5 form entry, and we know we have 30 places in Ysgol y Ffin. But it still is, a reasonable increase for us, even to the lowest target. However, compared to the proportion, it's still relatively low compared to the proportion over Wales, and again, in recognition of our starting point. Okay, thanks, Will. So, to sum up then, the WESP timeline for 2022-2032. Over the next year, from January onwards, we will be in the process of consultation and planning for WESP. So there is a member seminar, I believe, on the 28th of January, where we will be able to look at what the priorities are, what we're thinking of draft targets, and the kinds of actions we would need to be taking. And we'll be discussing that obviously with the WEF. We have quite a wide range of consultees we'll go out to discuss, so we'll talk across the region, but also importantly with our schools, with our, with our parents and children, as to what and how will go in that plan. So we have to, it isn't a draft plan, it's a draft plan. I think that was a typo. But we will submit our plan to Welsh ministers for approval in December of that year. So normally it takes them about 3 months to go through that and to feed back to us if there are any amendments to be made. And usually there will be a little bit of challenge as to, are we being ambitious enough? Is it realistic? How will we go forward with this? So once the plan has been agreed, we can implement it from 2020, and then we will continue on our annual progress report. So next, in 2020, we'll be finishing off one and moving on to the other. And then every year we'll have to present an annual review and amendment of the WESP, and we'll have an annual plan that we need to submit as well to Welsh ministers and our progress report. So, once we have the WESP in place, it will be something that we will need to be coming back to members on an annual basis and continue to, to develop and to review over time annually. So that's kind of the information that I hoped that I could share with you today. And on the last slide, there is a list of background papers that you might find useful if you want to go into a bit more detail, a bit, around the background or where we're going in the future. So if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to take them.
Oh, well, Sharon, thank you very much for that comprehensive report on WESP and taking us through there. Do you want to say anything, Will, or should we go to questions?
No, thank you, Chair. I think that was really clear from Sharon, so happy to move to questions now.
Okay. Any questions or comments from members of the committee, please? Oh, we'll go now then to Councillor Louise Brown.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. I wasn't looking at the presentation so much as the report itself. And I think on 5, you haven't mentioned about the resource implication, because on 5.1 it says basically there's a 35% capital contribution required from Monmouthshire as part of our Band B proposals, with the remaining capital funding being provided by the Welsh Government. My understanding was that for Welsh medium schools that the capital contribution from the Welsh Government was 100%. So I'm not quite sure about that. And obviously, in terms of a capital outlay, then you know, Band B has also included Chapsto Secondary School, which obviously has been a priority for the council for some time, and I didn't want it to conflict with that particular thing. So could you speak about that, and also any revenue implications, because I do understand that the Welsh Government have brought in legislation and guidance on this, but obviously there are resource implications here, not only on the capital side but the revenue side, and I want to know if Welsh Government are fully funding these proposals, particularly in light of the problems we have with our budget on a continuous basis. So I'd be interested to hear about that 5.1 of the report, which wasn't covered in your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Councillor Brown. Will, do you?
Yeah, I will. I'll pick those up.
Okay,
so I
thank you.
think two broad questions there, one about the capital elements and one about the ongoing revenue costs. So I'll have to go back and verify the Welsh medium position, Councillor Brown, with Welsh Government. Certainly the element that we submitted for Band B around Abergavenny included Welsh medium provision, and that was funded certainly at the 65/35 intervention rate that the Band B programme currently sits at. What has happened since then is that Welsh Government has provided grant funding at 100% rate, aside from Band B, for us to provide additional capacity in the Monmouth area and to expand Ysgol y Ffin in the south of the county. So there is funding at 100%, but not within the Band B stream for us, certainly at the moment. With regards to the ongoing additional revenue costs, this is a kind of a matter which has been raised in other local authorities, neighbours to Monmouthshire actually, that it does bring potential revenue pressure, which isn't funded separately from the capital funding that comes. So they don't fund money for the capital alongside money for the revenue. I think that's an understandable position, because we have to educate these children, and the money for that is fed to us through our aggregate external finance and the money that we raise locally through council tax. It's simply us being able to find a strategic way through it that balances where the children are educated and we meet that cost. So if those children, that's where it becomes difficult. So if the children are currently educated and our establishment is for English medium, but then we have a growing population demand for Welsh medium, we have to find a means by which we can fund that move from the English medium into the Welsh medium, without it having too big a head cost, I guess, in terms of the Welsh medium in the early stages. So it's really a matter of us being able to smooth that transition cost from the English medium into the Welsh medium. And it's really just the when you look at kind of the per capita expenditure on education and so on, it's sometimes the fact that there will be small numbers of pupils in startup classes, that it looks disproportionately more expensive to educate through the medium of Welsh, when it's not, in fact. It's just about how we allocate that resource across the piece.
Okay, thank you, Will. Councillor Brown, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I just wondered, I mean, obviously the 35% capital contribution you mentioned was in part of Band be. So I presume that relates to Abergavenny, and possibly the 100% relates to Monmouth. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, so there's two slightly different.
Because it's not clear on the report about the capital contribution or how much it will be, and I think it would be helpful for members to understand that, because I think that's probably the distinction and where the confusion arises. Am I right on that or not?
Yes. Yeah, I think yes, you are. So the 100% is to regard to Ysgol y Ffin and the new provision in the Monmouth area. The 65-35% band B piece is with regards to Abergavenny.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions or comments from members? Yeah, Councillor Maggie Harris for Musk.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, both. Thank you, Sharon, for the going through the plans for us. I really wanted to ask about provision for ALN pupils. I wondered what kind of provision will be available, not just in our area, but others, for pupils who don't make progress. Is it just assumed they'll automatically go back into the English school? And is it, as such, you know, would local schools then actually have an ALN overload? I mean, I'm not trying to victimise this, I'm just trying to work it out. What provision are we able to make all over Wales? What are the implications of this for those pupils choosing to be in an English school at secondary level as opposed to a Welsh school? I only ask this because my son-in-law actually chose this when he was young. He's a fluent Welsh speaker, but chose to be educated through English.
Thank you for your question, and it is a very important question, particularly regarding the availability of services at this minute in time through the medium of Welsh. So the strength of us working regionally we made rapid steps over the last 18 months in how we develop and share information. So everything for the new bill, the supporting evidence, the documentation, is all through the medium of Welsh. Training has been delivered through the medium of Welsh for ALN, and we are obviously very mindful through recruitment that we are looking for people who have the skills that are needed to help and support children with additional learning needs, but can do so through the medium of Welsh. So in our own SPLD team, for example, we have one of our team members who is Welsh speaking as well as English speaking, so can work through both mediums. We are not where we need to be at the moment because of the recruitment issues that we face. However, it is something that as a region we are working together, and where we have expertise that we can share in certain areas, that's what we're trying to establish and develop and embed in that regional approach. Over time, that will change, and we will have more Welsh speakers who are skilled in, or across the piece, that will be able to provide that advice and support. So, and that's part of retaining the ALN outcome as a really important and central part of the WESP going forward.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Will, are you going to come in on children transferring into secondary?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Welsh
yes.
medium at primary, but then transferring into, making
English
the decision to go into English medium at secondary level. Or Sharon, do you want to pick up on that?
I don't mind it. Certainly the issue, well, we have spoken to lots of people about, and lots of parents about transferring from primary school into secondary school. And I understand, certainly, if you were living in the furthest corner of Caldecott, it was a long, long way to travel up Winflew, particularly when you were quite young. We've got 2 Welsh medium secondary schools that we feed into now, and the rates of transfer at the moment are not as high as we would hope. So not everybody is taking that decision to transfer into secondary school. We're hoping that as we now have secure Welsh medium provision at secondary level, both in the north and the south, that is accessible. And I know we might have a discussion about the time it may take, but it is accessible, that will over time come through. And it will encourage more parents to take that decision to put their children into Welsh medium education from the earliest point, and then to continue that education right the way through to the end of secondary level. Certainly, we're looking at the focus of early years and childcare through in Welsh medium settings to be able to, bolster that as well.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Martin Croker, you've got your hand up. Do you want to come in, please?
Thank you, Chair. Observant members may notice that above my head here, I'm actually asking this question in semaphore as well. But for those who don't understand that, verbally, I'd just like to go on a little bit from Maggie Harris's question around ALM. And it's good to see that we are part of a team of partners in developing ALM. But I've got some concern about the provision of assessment and advice by external professionals as part of the assessment process. So if a child needs advice from a clinician about their learning difficulties, whether that can be provided yet, guaranteed through the medium of Welsh. And then secondly, there are a few thankfully rare cases where children from time to time need hospitalisation because of their additional needs. I'm thinking of very cruel illnesses like cystic fibrosis, where from time to time a child would need to go into hospital to have their lungs cleared. And during that time, they will receive education in hospital. And if they are used to Welsh medium education, could that continue to be provided during hospitalisation, or would they have to have that period of teaching in English? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. With the first one, I think that, certainly the regional approach is strengthening the opportunities to deliver any support and assessment for additional learning needs through the medium of Welsh, but we recognise that we're not there. And certainly the clinicians will also be looking at how they can do that too, because there will be more people speaking Welsh and more people expecting to access services through the medium of Welsh. The regional work does does work closely with the clinicians in order to develop the services across, and all of the assessment materials at the moment have been and or will have almost been completed through the medium of Welsh. So schools will have access to those. So everything will be in place to support schools. It will take a little further time with clinicians in order to, in the same way as we're looking at our services, moving to offer everything, all of our services through the medium of Welsh. That is the same for clinicians, although it is on the agenda and it is something that the regional coordinator will be pursuing on a regional behalf. So looking again, Martin, at the children who are hospitalised, one of the things that we've realised and benefited from the pandemic is that we can support learners at distance. There are teachers who will be able to support learners in hospital, and the likelihood is that whether it's English or Welsh medium now, that will be quite a bit of distance learning or blended learning, as we've seen over these past few months. And it's far easier now for children to be able to access learning through the medium of English or Welsh, wherever they are. And that will be that, I think we're planning to develop that again with our regional partners to ensure that children can continue learning wherever they are.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions or issues before we sum up? Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask the question about, I wasn't quite clear about the point you were making about English language and Welsh language. I'm presuming English language will remain compulsory regardless. Otherwise, I think it will be a daft plan rather than a draft plan. I think the other question I've got is basically to do with the impact on border schools, you know, where there's secondary schools where there's a choice of going to the local school or going to the a secondary school in England. And the third question I've got is about parental demand, you know, so in other words, in terms of building schools, or you know, that there's a desire and there's a consultation on the actual need and requirement for schools as opposed to target levels, because you know, if you build schools and you haven't got the pupil numbers that you need. And the fourth question is about teaching staff, because obviously being able to speak Welsh and to teach in the medium of Welsh, I would have thought, as well as being, you know, covering a particular subject, is quite a high requirement. And what difference will that make? So I hope asking 4 questions isn't too much, but thank you.
Okay,
thank you, Brown. I'll try and go through them one at a time. So looking at the English language and Welsh language, the consultation is out at the moment to see whether there needs to be a requirement for Welsh language. Welsh language is already compulsory from age 3 right through to 16. However, English language is compulsory from year 3 right through to 16 in English medium schools. In many ways, if we are delivering the curriculum and providing opportunities for language and communication in foundation phase, it's very much a mixed mode of delivery to develop the confidence and familiarisation of children with the Welsh language and English language. Often skills are being delivered and reinforced, and the language, English and Welsh, are being used alongside each other. So the question from Welsh Government is, do we need to make English language compulsory from year 3 to the foundation phase, or can it be language so we can develop both languages side by side so that the children have confidence, they have an understanding, and they can switch from one language to the other far easier. Many of our children in Monmouthshire, for example, come from English-speaking homes, and you know, for them to be able to develop Welsh skills and to be immersed in that, or to at least have the opportunity to use Welsh across their play, across their you know, interactions on a daily level, will embed the language in their lives far better than having to stick to one language or another as a compulsory element. There's always that balance of, you know, where you spend your time. The questions will be, if English doesn't become compulsory until 7, will that have an impact on standards of English at a later point? And I suppose that's the you know, point of the consultation, the result to decide whether that is the right thing to do. Sorry, I'm really sorry, my computer might just drop me out for a minute. So the balance between the two is difficult at this minute. Sorry, let me go back to that. So Welsh Government will have to decide whether that will have an impact on English language overall and the standards, and whether it won't, and whether it will give a richness and a better level of skill for the rest, you know, for all of the children together. The impact on border schools, I understand that, you know, schools are concerned about Welsh language. However, the benefits of being able to speak 2 languages are beneficial throughout life in whatever you're doing. If you can learn a language, 2 languages, you can learn 3 and 4. And there are lots of advantages that, you know, learning Welsh would give. One of the things as a local authority we need, we can support schools with is to be able to promote those benefits. We've increased the way how we promote those, that through all of the things that we have on our websites, but also through any promotional information. We've worked again with the region in order to develop and share that, and that information will be available at the point of new housing as and when those developments are up and running and in place, and parents are looking to buy houses in those areas. So there is concerns, but I think over time that will sort of sort itself out a little bit. And then parental demand. I think the point of the WESP for us as any local authority in Wales is we are there to promote Welsh language and to develop and increase the language. So in order for us to do that, that's what we need to be thinking about and need to take action, which will be part of our WESP. One of the barriers, I think, to some families moving into Wales and finding a place for their child is if they have a little one who's ready to go into reception, but also have another child who's in year 2 or year 4, and they might want to go into Welsh medium education. It's difficult because a latecomer might well struggle. And regionally, we need to find our solution to that, so that if a family does want to access Welsh medium education, perhaps they haven't for their other children, they are able to make that move from one to the other. So so that is something that we'll need to be looking at. And then if we move on to teaching and staff skills, lots of our teachers have engaged in the sabbatical, which, as I said earlier, gives us the opportunity to be able to teach in Welsh and in a Welsh school. However, we have a huge uptake in professional learning in Welsh as a second language in our schools. And when you visit our schools, you can actually see that. And it means that we are able to have confidence that at the moment Welsh language is developing. I think there will be a recruitment issue that potentially could arise if we don't have enough people who are Welsh speaking who enter the teaching profession, and particularly at secondary level, to deliver certain subjects that are in shortage area anyway. And that's something that we need to be able to look to support strongly going forward.
Thanks. Will, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on the on that bit around school choice and parental choice, just to say, the evidence in Monmouthshire is mixed. I think that we have 2 schools very close to the border in Chapsto and Monmouth, and the pressures around perceptions of Welsh education differ in both of those towns. And I've had extensive discussions with members of the public in Chapsto over the years about certain aspects of the Welsh curriculum, the Welsh BAC and so on. But in Monmouth, we see a significant influx of learners from England. So it's just interesting that the dynamic on the border isn't a universal dynamic, and that there are kind of localized nuances to it. I think, clearly, what we want is that our children attend Monmouthshire schools, be they Welsh medium or English medium. We want them to come to our schools, and we want to give our children the best education that we possibly can. And I think that the steps that Sharon's outlined as we consider what our future WESP looks like will hopefully enable more of those children to learn through the medium of Welsh.
Okay. Thanks, Will. Thanks, Will.
Yes, thank you. Is it possible to be sent a link to the consultation on the English language and Welsh language compulsory point that you made in the first response?
Yeah, I can send you the link to it. The consultation closed on the 4th, but I will send you any information I have.
Oh, so it's already closed. Yeah, I mean, I would have thought it was sensible to keep both going actually myself, but yeah, it's a shame that's already finished. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brown. Any other questions or comments on the WESP on the presentation this morning? Well, first and foremost, obviously, I'd like to thank Will and particularly Sharon Randall-Smith for taking us through the WESP this morning. Diolch yn fawr. It's really highlighted some of the issues, and obviously that there are quite strong targets there to meet in an authority which is predominantly English. And we sit very close to the border, so we are in a sense influenced by that. And obviously, if you look at, Wrexham Authority in the north, they have the same sorts of issues, or any authority coming down the border area. Obviously, we've raised sort of capital issues, which Will McLean addressed, which Councillor Louise Brown raised, and also very important questions raised by Maggie Harris and Councillor Grocott in terms of ALN provision through the medium of Welsh, and I think that is an important area, and further than that, which is out of our hands to a certain degree in terms of clinicians within the Aneurin Bevan Health Board Trust, that they can operate through that they have some clinicians who could operate through the medium of Welsh, and it is probably more difficult in an area like this, as opposed even to say somewhere like Cardiff, where there is more of a concentration of Welsh speakers and of professional people who can operate through both languages. But ALN is obviously a crucial area, whether it be in English medium or in Welsh medium, and certainly my perception is that children who have additional learning needs in Welsh medium are generally well supported and continue their education through the medium of Welsh. Obviously, there is sometimes a dropout in terms of children moving from Welsh medium into English medium. Raised the issue as well of transfer from Key Stage 2 into Key Stage 3. And I think Will hit on it when he said, obviously, it's the issues about parental choice. At the end of the day, if you are a parent, then you make those choices for your child, and whether they go into maintained schools or into maintained English medium or into independent schools, that is a parental choice. And it is heartening within this authority to have 2 thriving Welsh medium schools at the moment, and now with the prospect of a 3rd coming on board at primary level. I think that is very, very encouraging. There are issues undoubtedly about staffing, and if you look at Ysgol Gyfun Gwyn Lliw, and I'm sure Ysgol East Coed in Newport, they both have probably a large number of teachers who come in from the Cardiff area to work, because that's where the pool of expertise lies. That's where teachers choose to live, and that is an ongoing issue. I mean, I'm very much encouraged by the fact that staff have engaged in the sabbatical, which is quite a challenge to learn any language, regardless, and also the fact that so many teaching colleagues, have decided to improve or work on Welsh as a second language, and again, I think that is encouraging. There is a WESP meeting this week, tomorrow, I believe. Yeah, and I'm sure some of these other issues will be teased out. It's good as well that early next year now we're going to have a workshop on Welsh medium, and we can discuss then some of the more sort of nitty-gritty issues that will emerge. But as I say, at the end of the day, I am grateful for the 2 of you coming today to present this, and also encouraged by the fact that Monmouthshire has made steps. It is probably more difficult in an authority like this, but obviously WESP will press us as an authority in terms, if you look at those percentage figures, to get up to 30% by 2031, and then 40% of children receiving their education through the medium of Welsh by 2050, then obviously that it will be quite a steep hill to climb. But once again, thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr. Thanks for your time this morning. I think it's been very worthwhile looking at that, and certainly I feel clearer about it. I'm sure other members of the committee do as well. So thanks for your input, both.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Diolch yn fawr. We move now then to agenda item number 6, to look at the forward work plan for this committee, just very briefly. In terms of the next meeting, will be on the 19th of January, which is looking at the budget scrutiny, and that will obviously be scrutiny of the budget proposals for 2021-2022. We've then we're pushing in a workshop on the 28th of January, which is a workshop on Welsh medium education, and that will be an opportunity for all members to join and to take part. And I think that will look at some of the more basic issues of siting of the new school, etc. And then in February, mid-February, we have CYP, which will have 2 items, one from EAS on their strategies, etc., the business plan, and also looking at free school meals strategy. So that will be in mid-February. I'd like to make the comment, I don't know whether people agree, but I think it is probably better and more productive for us to have 2 main agenda items per meeting. Yeah, sorry, I've just confirmed that the date is the 11th of February for the EAS and free school meals meeting, and that is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But going back to my point, we've gone for 2 agenda items, and I've just picked up now, we've also apologies from Faye Middleton today, who is unwell, so we'll add that to the apologies list. But I think probably having 2 agenda items is more productive, as opposed to trying to push more in and then probably not, as it were, doing them justice. Agenda item 7, a council and cabinet work planner. It's there really for information. 8, we look now then to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting. Are people happy with the minutes of the previous meeting? I take silence means assent.
Yes.
Yeah, everybody happy?
Yes. Yes. I'll move them, Chair.
Pardon? Sorry, Councillor Grogan. Yes, thanks.
I'm just saying I'll move them, Chair.
All right, thank you, Councillor Grogan. That's very helpful. And then in terms of, just to confirm, the next meeting, just looking for my dates now, of CYP, and that is the 19th of January at 10 o'clock, and obviously with a pre-meeting at 9:30.
Right. Okay.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We won't meet now before Christmas. Obviously, we wish you a Merry Christmas, Nadolig Llawen, and obviously hopefully meet and be, hopefully you all keep fit and well, and obviously in these dire times keep COVID free. But thanks for all your inputs today, and thank you for attending another meeting of CYP. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy Christmas.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye then.
Bye.
Thanks. Thanks, Sharon, for this morning. Sharon, you still there? Yeah, go on. Okay.
Chair, I'm back.
Yeah, is Malcolm left, or is he still? I don't know.